The Bondi Beach terror attack made headlines in every major newspaper around the world. The failures of our government, intelligence agencies, laid bare for all to see. The Times of London ran with bloodbath at Bondi Beach. The Daily Express and the Daily Mail featured the heroic moment. A man disarmed one of the shooters. The Sun had Bondi fiends, dad and son. The Independent simply had an act of evil. The UK Daily Telegraph had hate and heroism on Bondi, while perhaps the most powerful was the coverage from Ben English's Daily Telegraph, which simply stated, "You bastards." Now, it must be said that the surviving gunman who was just pictured on the front of that paper has since been charged for a range of offences, including multiple counts of terrorism and murder. Joining me now to discuss is host of Power Hour, Gabriella Power. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, look, you were one of the journalists, and I remember because we discussed it on Sunday and you weren't working and you wanted to go down there and cover it. How do you think that the media has handled this story? It's a very difficult thing to cover.
Yeah, it is. Look, those papers, I think they really cut through, particularly the Daily Telegraph front page, just how angry everyone is about what has happened, this horrific terror attack on Bondi Beach. Running there on Sunday, obviously, it was like a scene from a horror film. So many people were so shocked, confused, so many tears. People were on the phone, very panicked. I was speaking to survivors that still had blood on them, were separated from their children. Absolute horror scene. So horrific. It's going to take this community a really long time to heal from this. Interesting about the media reporting and coverage of this. I was speaking to a journalist on my show who is based in the US, in Florida. She's a Jewish journalist, and she was all over the reporting and noticing who was slow to call this out for an attack on Jews, and some outlets were very slow. People have been murdered, and it took them several hours until they started actually reporting the truth that this was an attack targeting the Jewish community. And there is a lot of anger out there about the reporting, particularly on the Israel-Gaza conflict and how biased it has been in many outlets. I was actually speaking to someone at Bondi on Sunday night. He told me that he was approached by a journalist to get his recollection of what actually took place. He asked where they were from. They were from the New York Times. He said, "I will not speak to you," because the New York Times has been pretty biased. It's been accused of being biased against Israel, depicting Israel as the aggressor in this war. Of course, the New York Times had to admit that it published a misleading image on its front page of a child that was starving to kind of infer that this child was starving. They did the fake hospital bombing very on in the conflict. That was an egregious error. They had to wrap that back and apologise. But I think the Jewish community doesn't forget, and our national broadcaster has been in a bit of... Absolutely. Well, it was the following day as well. So I went back out to Bondi on Monday. That's when the tributes started pouring in. People were laying flowers, grieving, mourning the loss of those innocent lives that were killed in such a horrific way. And there is real anger in the community. This Jewish community is not going to forget the way the media downplayed anti-Semitism in some parts, and also the way they depicted the war and the way they demonised Israel. Here's this Jewish person, this Jewish Australian, calling out the ABC directly.
I've got to say, will you cut out the biased reporting?
Yeah, and I think so many people agree with that. She's not the only person I've spoken to that feel angry about how the ABC has covered the Israel-Gaza conflict and the rise in anti-Semitism here. I mean, plenty of outlets, not just the ABC, have run Hamas propaganda without a lot of scepticism, have failed to kind of challenge the accusations of genocide. And meanwhile, we've had protests that have been depicted as largely peaceful when there have been ISIS flags in our protest on Sydney Harbour Bridge only a few months ago. And now we have an ISIS-inspired terror attack on Bondi.
Yeah, well, they were marching alongside Hamas flags, and you can't control what someone carries next to you. But these are the people you're keeping company with. There's photos of the Ayatollah. There were some Labor politicians photographed near those signs of the Ayatollah. I mean, it's incredibly damaging for these people. Tell me about the influencers. How have they behaved during all of this?
Some of them have behaved, I think, horrifically. I mean, Abbie Chatfield is one example. Let's just listen to what she has said in the past. She has previously posted pretty proudly and publicly, "Are you pro-Israel? Gross." She's also said she has a podcast that's popular. She says, "I am biased. I acknowledge that. I will not platform a Zionist." That is something she has declared she's been demonising Zionists, and she has been marching at those protests alongside others who have been supporting extremists such as Hamas. Or now, all of a sudden, she's sickened by this tragedy. Let's just take a listen to her response.
As an Australian, as someone that lives in Bondi, first of all, our tragedy is not yours to politicise, particularly when your politicisation makes no sense.
Yeah, she went on a rant.
Our tragedy, all of a sudden. So what, all of a sudden she's now an advocate for the Jewish... That is bizarre. That's strange.
It's really difficult to hear. She went on a rant for nearly 4 minutes talking about US politics and US gun laws. This is about the Jewish community, and anti-Semitism, as we know, has just been allowed to fester here, and part of that is because these protests have been, going on week after week, chanting. Some people attending those protests have been chanting anti-Semitic things. River to the sea, globalise the Intifada. It's not just Abbie Chatfield, though. There's Hannah Ferguson from Cheek Media. In the past, she's been a big supporter of Greta Thunberg and her publicity stunt going into Gaza. This Cheek Media post has also in the past accused Israel of abducting Greta Thunberg and others. It's just absolutely insane. Anyway, Cheek Media is now saying, in response to the terror attack, this week, far-right politicians will use this mass murder as a vehicle for their racist, anti-immigration policies. Parts of the media will decide the commercial value of clicks is worth more than the integrity of respectful and accurate reporting.
The commercial value of clicks. Okay. I mean, this is incredible. So basically, the problem as this influencer, this crazy person is putting it, is the response, not the act. And what's the insinuation that if I talk about it, if I cover it, what I'm commercialising it, am I? Is that the suggestion? These people, they don't have 10 IQ points between them, and they have such a following. They're so influential with young women, particularly. I mean, we're going to have to. There's an entire generation which is listening to these people, and it's helping them form their views. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, and we've seen it for the last 2 years. I mean, it's been cool to be pro-Palestine. It's been really woke to be pro-Palestine and anti-Israel. I mean, it's been in our face. And meanwhile, synagogues have been burned. We've seen F the Jews, kill the Jews, been spray painted on walls. Jews have been targeted, and so many people in the Jewish community I have spoken with are not surprised. And, when you just look at the environment and some of these influences and what they have contributed over the last 2 years, this anti-Israel sentiment has not helped.
Yeah, and it's what they're choosing to call out as well. And that we all saw the footage right after October 7. There was a gathering, the hate preachers in Western Sydney making these points that it was a moment to be celebrated. And I really feel like the media... It's not, look, they're not law enforcement. They don't decide who goes to jail and who gets prosecuted. But the focus wasn't there. And so there's obviously a cohort of people that harbour these views. And the media, I think, failed.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yoni Bashan had a great article as well in The Australian calling out many of the influencers. Plenty of people, by the way, who are happy to share pretty horrific images coming out of Gaza are also saying, stop sharing the images.
I wonder why.
From Bondi Beach. It's too horrific. And, I think it's very sad. A lot of people were caught up in the social media trends, trending being pro-Palestine. And
well, thank you for being a real journalist, going on the ground and talking to the actual victims and educating Australians about what's happened. Thank you so much for your time and your insights.